It was a night I'll never forget, no matter how much I try to push it from my mind. You ever have that strange, gut-wrenching feeling when everything around you feels off? That's how it started. The air was thick, suffocating, even though the storm hadn't hit yet. I remember standing outside my house staring at the sky. It wasn't just dark, it was an unnatural kind of black, like the clouds were swallowing the light. No stars, no moon, just this oppressive canopy hanging overhead. The wind had stopped completely, which felt even stranger. Not a single leaf moved. It was so quiet that I could hear my own breathing, loud and uneasy. Then came the first rumble of thunder, low and distant, like a warning growl from something enormous and angry. That was when I noticed it, a shadow flickering in the distance just as the lightning flashed. I thought it might be a trick of the light or my imagination, but as I stood there frozen, I swear it moved closer, slowly, deliberately, and that was before the rain came, before the real horror began. Looking back, I wish I had gone inside right then. Maybe it would have ended differently. When the storm finally hit, it was like flipping a switch from eerie silence to chaos. I was sitting in the living room, my phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly, when the lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely. The room went pitch black, and for a moment, the only light came from my phone's dim screen. The power outage wasn't what unnerved me. It was the sudden, overwhelming sense of isolation. The thunder roared like it was right above the house, shaking the walls with each crash. Rain began to hammer against the windows, sharp and relentless. But it wasn't the storm that made my heart race. It was the other noises. At first, I chalked it up to the wind. The faint creaking of floorboards upstairs, the soft tapping on the glass, even what sounded like whispers somewhere in the house. I told myself it was all in my head. But then I heard a distinct noise, clear as day, the sound of footsteps, not hurried, but slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth in the hallway upstairs. I held my breath, trying to convince myself it was just the old house settling. But when a loud thud came from the kitchen, like something heavy had fallen, I nearly jumped out of my skin. My phone flashlight barely cut through the darkness as I moved to investigate, every muscle in my body tense. The wind howled louder, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move across the kitchen wall, but there was no one there. My hands were shaking by then, my breath coming out in shallow gasps, and yet the worst was still to come. The rain was coming down in sheets, pounding against the window so hard it sounded like it was trying to get in. Every few seconds, lightning would flash, illuminating the room for the briefest moment. Each time, my heart leapt into my throat, half expecting to see someone or something standing in the shadows. But the real terror wasn't what I could see. It was what I could hear. At first, I thought it was just the wind. It had picked up, wailing through the cracks in the old house. But then I noticed it, low murmurs, almost too quiet to catch. They didn't come from outside. No, they were inside the house, drifting through the dark like they had no source. "Leave," one voice whispered, barely audible. My stomach twisted into knots. I froze, my flashlight flickering weakly as I scanned the room. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, coming from every direction. It was as if they were carried on the rain, seeping through the walls. A sharp knock at the window made me spin around. But when I shone the light on the glass, all I saw was my own pale, terrified reflection. Then came the lightning. This time, it stayed longer, streaking across the sky in jagged veins of light. And there, standing at the edge of the yard, I saw them. 3 figures, cloaked in shadow, their faces hidden. They didn't move, didn't flinch, even as the rain poured over them. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering in my ears. Another flash, and they were gone. I told myself I must have imagined them, but deep down, I knew better. The whispers didn't stop, though. They seemed closer now, hissing warnings I didn't want to understand. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. By the time I worked up the courage to move, the whispers had stopped, leaving the house eerily quiet. But the silence wasn't comforting. It felt alive, like something was holding its breath, waiting. I clutched the flashlight like a lifeline and edged my way toward the stairs, my footsteps barely making a sound on the creaky wooden floor. Halfway up, I froze. A door upstairs creaked open, slowly, deliberately. I wanted to run, to bolt out of the house and into the storm, but something kept me rooted in place. The air was thick, heavy, and it felt like I was being watched. I forced myself to climb the rest of the stairs, my legs trembling with each step. The hallway stretched out in front of me, the doors to the bedrooms standing slightly ajar. My breath came in shallow gasps as I scanned each one. When I reached the last door, my heart sank. The attic door was wide open. The pull-down ladder extended like an invitation. A faint tapping sound echoed from above, followed by what I can only describe as a low, guttural sigh. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, but deep down, I knew better. The flashlight beam wavered as I climbed the ladder, each step feeling like it might be my last. The attic was colder than the rest of the house, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth. I swung the flashlight around, and that's when I saw it. Scrawled on the wooden beams were strange symbols, crude and jagged, as if carved in desperation. Beneath them lay a small pile of objects, photos, trinkets, and a mirror, cracked down the middle. I caught movement in the mirror's reflection, something behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. Then the ladder slammed shut. The whispers started again, louder this time, and I knew I wasn't alone. I wasn't getting out of there without facing whatever it was. When the storm finally passed, it left a strange, almost oppressive silence in its wake. The rain stopped so suddenly it felt unnatural, and the winds that had howled all night were gone, as if they'd never existed. I don't remember much about how I got out of the attic, just the raw, primal instinct to escape. Somehow I found myself back in the living room, soaked in sweat, gripping the flashlight so tightly my fingers ached. The first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Everything looked normal, as if the chaos of the night had been nothing more than a fever dream. But it wasn't normal. I wasn't. The symbols I'd seen in the attic were burned into my memory, and every creak of the house made my skin crawl. I spent hours searching for any sign of what I'd experienced. Footprints, broken windows, anything, but found nothing. The whispers, the shadows, the figures in the yard. It was like they'd been erased. But then I noticed something I couldn't explain. The mirror from the attic was sitting on my kitchen table, cracked exactly as I'd seen it. I hadn't brought it down. My stomach churned as I realized the pile of trinkets and photos was there too. One of the photos caught my eye. It was of my house, taken from the outside. Standing in the window was a shadowy figure I didn't recognize. Even now, I can't sleep when it rains. The sound of thunder sends me spiraling back to that night, and every flash of lightning makes me think I'll see them again. People tell me it was just a storm, that I was imagining things, but deep down, I know better. Storms end. Fear doesn't.